Welcome back to Tipsy Whiskey Shenanigans. I'm Steven, and tonight, whenever the heck you're watching this, we're getting into the top 6 bourbon distilleries that aren't in Kentucky. But before we get into that, please do me that favor, like, comment, subscribe, as well as a word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by ZBiotics. If you have ever skipped the gym after a night of drinking, just like I do about every single week right after my live streams, well then you need ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it the most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before you drink alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Try ZBiotics for yourself today. Go to zbiotics.com/tipsy, use a QR code down there, and use the code TIPSY at checkout to get 15% off on your first order. Also, ZBiotics is 100% money back guaranteed. So if for whatever reason you are unsatisfied, they will refund you, no questions asked. We're going to head to zbiotics.com/tipsy and use the code TIPSY at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Thank you again, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this video, but let's get back to it. So today we are talking about bourbon distilleries outside of Kentucky. That being said, there are probably a lot of amazing bourbon distilleries, kind of crafty, small-time gigs all around the country. So I can only really speak on the ones I've had. So if you have like a fan favorite one and it's not on this list, it's probably likely because I've never tried it. The rules for this, plain and simple, no juice in their bourbon product can be from Kentucky. So that does exclude really, really good blenders like the Barrel People, Stellum, and other distilleries like Redwood Empire and High West. So those kinds of distilleries that do like a mix of blending and sourcing, those are unfortunately excluded from this. So these are going to be bourbon distilleries that just make their own juice. And of course, the first one, the primary best bourbon distillery outside of Kentucky, you guessed it, MGP, Indiana, so on and so forth. I don't own any Remus bottles, but this is a Doc Swinson's bottle. And yes, I did verify because I do know that they do source a few things. This 100% Indiana raised juice, also known as MGP. MGP is probably the greatest bourbon distillery of all time. Probably. I mean, that might be a bold statement, and I don't know if I truly agree with it per se. I don't know if I truly entirely agree with that either, but a lot of people who are sourcing a lot of those new brands like Nulu, so on and so forth, a lot of it's MGP. A lot of it is non-Kentucky juice. And usually when you think of Kentucky and you're thinking of high quality juice, MGP takes the cake because they release some really, really good stuff that stands up to and surpasses quite a lot of those Kentucky bourbons. I've had a lot of blended MGP products, like some stuff from Doc Swinson's that goes toe-to-toe with like a Wild Turkey, a Russell Single Barrel, an Old Forester, a 1792 Foolproof, Knob Creek, things of that nature. So MGP really does produce a lot of great, great juice, and they can stand up to a lot of those really well-known Kentucky distilleries. So they're by far the best non-Kentucky bourbon distillery. But after that one, getting into one that is going to raise a lot of contention. Maybe, potentially. It has the possibilities of getting a little contentious in the comments. So if you disagree, let me know down below. But we got Jack Daniel's. Jack Daniel's is fan-freaking-tastic. Just like MGP, they're well known for making whiskey. They're well known for making Tennessee whiskey. I will argue. Tennessee whiskey meets all of the requirements to be bourbon. So I personally think Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. Tennessee whiskey is just as much bourbon as it is Tennessee whiskey. Even if it's labeled Tennessee whiskey is bourbon with extra steps. Jack Daniel's is one of the most well-known whiskey producers of all time, and they make some ridiculous bottles. You've seen a ton on the channel. That bonded whiskey is not really my favorite per se, but the Jack Daniel's single barrel and the single barrel proofs are amazing. And not technically a bourbon, but the triple mash blew my mind. Jack Daniel's is, again, a fantastic Brown-Forman distillery, and they are well known for making Tennessee whiskey, which I consider to be basically bourbon with extra steps. So they are one of my favorite non-Kentucky bourbon distilleries. But then getting out of large, really well-known brands, we're starting to get a little bit lesser known type brands because, well, you know, most of the bourbon distilleries that are well-known are inside of Kentucky. So the next 4 on this list are going to be a little bit kind of hidden gems or lesser known brands. And the first one, Middle West Spirits. Middle West Spirits is fantastic. Love their stuff. They do a lot of bourbon, actually. Actually, they also produce quite a bit of bourbon for other brands as well. Again, lesser known brands, but Middle West Spirits does a lot of really good bourbons. I've had quite a few of their bourbons. This one's my personal favorite, the sherry cast finish bourbon. And I've also had some of their lower proof bourbon that they source for other companies or other companies source from them. Either which way, they're doing a lot of really good stuff. And especially these like tube whiskeys, man, this tube bourbon, freaking phenomenal. One of the better bourbons I had the privilege of trying last year, and I still really enjoy this. And they're like one of those brands that I wish was in my area because I want to try more of them. Unfortunately, I have to buy all those online, so I don't own too many of them because I hate paying for shipping, but they're phenomenal. I love the heck out of that stuff, and I'm likely going to buy more of their bourbon in the near future. And then moving on to another bourbon brand that unfortunately is not in my area as well, that is going to be Starlight Starbright, this bad mamma jamma brand of a bottle. Love the heck out of Starlight. Starlight Distillery does some phenomenal work. Primarily, I see them doing a lot of, we'll call it second barrelings of their bourbons. I've personally never seen any of their just standalone products, but that being said, I also don't see them in my area. So usually when I'm online and like hunting for a bottle, usually see kind of those more limited type stuff, those finish, those double barrel variants, things of that nature. But they do some of the greatest like 4-year-old craft whiskey that's finished in some sort of barrel. This sherry finish one is my personal favorite, because I'm a sucker for sherry finish stuff. For a craft distillery that's only releasing like 4.5, 5-year-old whiskey, this is some of the greatest whiskey I've ever had. I put some of these really close to on par with those MGP barrels of like the same age, same type, so on and so forth. They're different, but they're different in different kinds of ways. Like I think they were both still very much so on par with the same quality of the whiskey, but this ironically was cheaper. So Starlight, for sure, they know what they're doing because they can even hold up to that MGP that's at like that same relative age. But now we're getting in the meats and potatoes of these things. The potatoes and the meats. My favorite area for bourbon outside of Kentucky, outside of I guess MGP and, you know, Tennessee, Texas bourbon. And my go-to Texas bourbon that everyone knows me for loving, and I still think is very valid, Still Austin. They are probably one of the greatest Texas distilleries out there. This is probably one of my favorite Texas bourbons out there. I'm a huge fan of the Musician, the Still Austin straight bourbon whiskey. I have consumed like 4 or 5 at this point of the cash strength stuff because it's a ridiculously good deal and it's so freaking good. So good. It is, again, I always call it kind of like a hybridization of a traditional pot still Texas whiskey as well as kind of like a Kentucky bourbon. This stuff really tastes like you sourced a Kentucky bourbon, you blended it with a Texas whiskey, and you kind of found like an in-between, one that has like those like youthful kind of corny Texas like funky notes that not a lot of people totally love, but I personally think are phenomenal. But that's the reason not a lot of people like Texas whiskey, as well as those kind of just traditional like Kentucky bourbon flavors. And this tastes like an in-between, but it's entirely Texas manufactured, still Austin at their facility. So this isn't any sort of sourcing or blending or whatever the heck going on. They're just doing a really, really good job over there to make a Texas bourbon taste like it's partially from Kentucky. Really like this stuff. Again, if you find the darker label, like the black one, which I have up there, don't know why I didn't pull it out for this video, but the dark label one is absolutely phenomenal. Also really like that one as well. And then staying in the Texas realm as well, because turns out a lot of the distilleries I really like that are outside of Kentucky for bourbon are also in Texas. Because, well, Texas makes some good bourbon. But that is the one, the only Iron Root Republic. These are ridiculous. I mean, it just goes to show, like, it won world's best bourbon in like 2020 or something, and for good reason. This is that perfect amount of like crafty Texas flavors while still having this robust, bold, just like really, really good brown sugar sweetness, like fruit roll up, kind of like peachy tones that you get on a lot of Texas bourbon. This stuff is bold, it's in your face, but it's not overly explosive, it's not overly aggressive, it's not like a huge punch of ethanol. It is really, really good. And it's 115 proof for like $50 in my area. $50 in my area, 115 proof. Like, I've had some funky Texas bourbons. This is not crazy. This is just more of a stereotypical Texas bourbon than that Still Austin was. My last one, asterisk again, because I work for them. I don't, I'm going to add them as an asterisk because it wouldn't be fair to bring them up without me disclosing first that, I work for them. And it is Adventurous Stills. This is the pinnacle of craft whiskey, in my opinion. Craft whiskey, one of the few fun things you can do about it is different, out there, kind of crazy stuff, like experimental stuff. And Adventurous Stills does that to a T. With their bourbon, which was the one that really got me interested in them and kind of sent me down the path to work with them in general, was the fact that there's a little bit of a chocolate malt in it. So it gets like very, very like chocolatey, coffee, roasty, kind of a desserty side of a bourbon. So not your everyday kind of bourbon, but a phenomenal, robust kind of night pour, like a nightcap. Really, really good. And these are all around that like 3-year-old mark. So they're all like really, really solid with a nice bit of like aging in the Southwest area, surprisingly, because you don't see a lot of Texas or even Arizona Southwest style whiskey that's over that whole like 3-4-year-old age gap, especially for craft, but they are doing it phenomenal. But that is a wrap for today's video. Please do me that favor, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below what you thought about the bottles I brought up, as well as, what are your favorite non-Kentucky distilleries? Let me know down below. Also, check out the Facebook, Instagram, and the Patreon. Links for all that stuff, again, down there below. That's a wrap for today's video. Cheers, y'all. We'll see you later.